What is the biggest elephant in the room that society needs to address? We've built a society that's completely lacking in community, and it's making us miserable. Bacteria is growing resistance to antibiotics. We need to get money out of politics. The internet has ruined our ability to girl-friendly communicate since it has devolved into a data farm for a handful of powerful corporations that benefit from driving engagement by pitting people against each other. We are continuing to treat the world like it's a rubbish dump and keep expecting that life will go on as it always has. Corporations and billionaires have way too much power. Some politicians are too old to still be active in politics. It doesn't matter what is the alternative. If somebody is lost on the stage, has a shutdown while she speaks, has a mental breakdown, suffers a stroke, gets terminal cancer, or any other terminal disease, speaks incoherently. She needs outside help to walk or talk. She is too old and should be removed immediately for the sake of decency and letting them spend their last time in peace and outside of public eye. Putting making a profit as our main priority in society, no matter the sector, be it healthcare, housing, education, renewable energy, etc. Lack of education. The percentage of adults who are absolute idiots is astounding. Anti-intellectualism. We've gotten to a point where we think it's cool, edgy, or acceptable to purport the dumbest of people and ideology. And when challenged, they say you're suppressing them. Despite the totality of evidence that grass is green, they'll tell you it's blue. An economic system that calls for continuous growth is unsustainable when population is on the decline. Garbage food. The overwhelming majority of people eat poorly because that's what the giant corporations want them to do. Andrew Zimmern did a show where he talked about food in our society. One of them showed how a small town got a new Dollar General store, which forced the mom and pop grocery store out of business. He walked through the DG and noted, "This is all the worst possible food. Nothing but chips, sodas, processed foods, candy, etc." The breakdown of basic civility and tolerance of nuance in public discourse. Misinformation being used to weaponize beliefs. It's okay to have different opinions on the facts, but we shouldn't have to disagree on what the facts actually are. Don't know if it's the biggest, but one of them is certainly the death of nuanced and fair debate discourse. The interest payments in the U.S. national debt are becoming unserviceable. The entire dollar system is groping toward collapse. Child abuse in all forms is largely ignored and much more common than people realize. Many with PTSD and warped views on relationships that never really accept or realize they were abused. The room is crammed so full of elephants, climate change, wealth disparity, lack of education, religion and government, misinformation spread across social media, lobbying, gerrymandering, homelessness, corporate corruption that I don't even know where to start. It is just a massive tangle of huge fat elephants. Climate change is probably the biggest, since the rest won't matter for much ducking longer if that's not dealt with. But that won't happen unless at least a few of the smaller elephants are addressed first. And I don't mean addressed. I mean taking mean and girlfriend duel. Lasting measures to solve the problem. Which just won't happen. It's tempting to be cynical or even nihilistic, but I try to do what I can locally. That's where it starts. Corporations exploiting slave labor overseas to manufacture their products. Shitty education system that produces a generation of weak-minded people. Plastics. Recycling is an absolute joke. We were all deceived. The population getting older. Eventually, the pendulum of the elderly and those supporting them will swing too far in the wrong direction. All too often, rapists and human traffickers get sentences that are too light for ruining countless people's lives. Shows like Law and Order SVU make it seem like the law treats them as especially heinous crimes. Heck, the opening narration even says so. But the reality is, while most people agree they are some of the worst crimes and are almost as bad as murder, the law hasn't really caught up with the general consensus, and rape kits end up being backlogged because the taxpayers' money that goes to law enforcement does not go to testing them in most states. In most states, a private citizen, such as a rape survivor and the victim's family if they died, have to pay for it. Insane. And seeing all the bad players in politics the past 8 years and the crazy people who vote for them, it's become clear this is by design. Our politicians no longer represent us. They rule over us. They do what they want and get rich doing it, and nothing we say will change that because they are the ones that would have to make that change and give up their power and wealth. Us, the sheer amount of people who are so strung out on the hardest of drugs, expediting the rate of deterioration mentally by adding in the stresses of living on the streets. I lost a number of childhood friends to this stuff, and the others are becoming more and more unrecognizable by the day. It's not an easy solution, but it feels like nothing is being done. And if something is being done, it's completely partisan. Either all compassion and no consequences accountability, or vice versa. Simple possession surely doesn't warrant incarceration, but street folk are armed more and more from what I've seen lately. Big blades, baseball bats, and more are pretty commonplace to see around high traffic areas. An old friend who got caught up in that life keeps getting let out of jail after being booked on felony charges of violence. It's happened 3 times this year. Something needs to be done, though. This is not sustainable, and the people profiting off all this deserve nothing but the worst, honestly. Not the people forced into trafficking, but the people choosing to distribute. The way social media is dividing us. Too much money being a politician. AI and automation are going to put a lot of people out of jobs: truck drivers, customer support, actors, writers, digital artists, etc., etc., etc. We're rapidly approaching a breaking point where we will have more people than jobs, because machines are simply better, more reliable, constantly available, cheaper to scale, etc. than humans at a lot of tasks. People who get put out of a job aren't just going to starve in the streets peacefully. We are going to need either a completely new set of jobs for them, specifically ones that require humans to perform, or we're going to have to embrace societal safety nets like universal basic income and universal healthcare to ensure people have an acceptable minimum quality of life even without a job. I get that there is a visceral reaction people have to this. I had to do this without government handouts. So you should too, but that's an overly simplistic, reactionary mindset. And while that may have been a perfectly reasonable stance back when you could work at the grocery store and afford a home, that's clearly no longer the case and is only getting worse. Tipping. Like, why am I tipping just so your employees can make ends meet? Isn't that your job? I mean, of course I'm going to tip because I'm not a monster, but like, shape up God. Lack of affordable housing, corrupt expensive healthcare system, and lack of high-speed rail. Homeless people and prisoners being dehumanized, so it's easier to ignore just how bad they have it. Even kids are taught to just ignore homeless people and to fear criminals and prisoners without ever going into further discussion when they're older. Just homeless people are to be ignored and can't always be trusted with money. Criminals did bad things, and thus are less than human. Project 2025. Stop concerning yourselves with red versus blue and right versus left, and start thinking about the ruling elite versus citizens. Mental health. It's challenging to teach children with learning difficulties, and we need a specialized approach for them to help them succeed in life. The UK hasn't had a democratically elected PM since Theresa May, who left office in 2019. We have had 3 others since then. I can't be the only one to think that's pretty ducking bad. Male African elephants tend to be the biggest. The 1% own practically everything. The rest of us fight over the scraps. If you don't tax the rich, everything will go down to shits.